Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to And She Thrived, which serves to hold space for Muslim divorced women. And we are now expanding our topics to serve women at large, focusing on healing, wellness, relationships, and spirituality. So we've done an episode previously with Sister Amina Thomson from the UK, and she is an integrative child and adolescent counselor and psychotherapist and has many years of experience working therapeutically with children, adolescents, families, and adults. Sister Amina has developed her own way of working called heartfulness. She is interested in intercultural issues and spirituality in the promotion of well-being for communities. She has had a fascinating life, and we've done an interview that focuses on her journey and her experience with trauma that led her to become a clinician herself. That interview was conducted prior to the genocide in Palestine and the atrocities that the Palestinians are still undergoing right now. It only seemed appropriate to preface the previous interview with some comment regarding the Palestinian situation. And so I hand it over to Sister Amina. Welcome. Good to see you again. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about what's happening in Palestine currently.
Yes, thank you, Sumaya, for this opportunity just to kind of really name and frame the horrific scenes that we're witnessing every single day that has been having an impact on all of us. Yeah, and in relation to post-traumatic stress disorder, there's no doubt that this genocide is going to be impacting the people of Gaza and also in the West Bank, and whoever was experiencing and had an impact of this horrific, terrible situation, once hopefully the ceasefire will be over, we can do some work with these people, because at the moment it's just impossible. They're not having access to food and to water and to their bare necessity needs, and have not been met. So it'd be very difficult to do any therapy with them, because they're consistently reliving the trauma every single day. And we just can't wait, all of us kind of holding our breath to see it come to an end, because it's really questions everything about our humanity and about our ethics and about our values. And we are all feeling the pain and the torture of what's going on at the moment. And I wish that we could just go there and help out, but the borders are closed. We can't even go and help anyone at the moment, and it's really frustrating for all of us just to witness what's going on. And let's hope that the South African lawyers, and I'm aware that there are other lawyers for different countries, but obviously it's South Africa who's taken this very important lead in trying to stop this genocide. So we wish them all well, and I hope that the verdict of the court will come very soon, because this really has to stop, and it has to stop now.
So, Sister Amina, is there any aspect of hope in this very dismal situation that we see ourselves in?
Hope is a very important aspect of our faith, not to lose hope, because Shaitan always wants us to despair and give up and lose hope. And as Muslims, as you can see, that the people of Gaza have actually demonstrated the resilience of having faith, that whatever happens to them, it is by Allah. It is not by, even though it's the people who are doing the action, it is what Allah wants them to go through, and they're going through it because of their faith. And either if they die, they'll go to Jannah, and if they have any disabilities or whatever it is, Allah will take care of them. That trust that people really have is what's keeping them going, and that is something that we need to always hold on to, that it doesn't matter whether we're going through post-traumatic stress disorder or any condition of the traumas that we have experienced, that we need to always have to strive into to be steadfast and to go through the word sabr sometimes is not understood. And sabr means to see something through in its process. And when one goes through that process, eventually they will start to heal. And sometimes when clients are going through therapy, they don't see that, that glimpse. We know with some clients, it takes them 3 months, with some 6 months. And then they talk about it's not as bad as how it was when I started therapy. And as soon as they start to feel that there's been a shift in their therapeutic process, it gives them that hope that since I made this progress now, I can really see that I am going to be improving and that I will get better. But once the impact is huge at the very beginning, they do get that glimpse of, or maybe I'm not going to get better. And I remember being in that state myself, thinking, I'm going to be like this forever, especially when the therapies that I was trying to seek, who were the only ones at the time, were not really helping me. And eventually I got to see that light, that I am going to get better, and that I am going to thrive, and that one day I will help other people. And that became my focus, because I have done the journey that I can help others.
It's beautiful. Thank you, Amina. And we'll be transitioning now into your story. Thank you so much. If you could just tell us a bit about the work that you do, your background, that would be a wonderful start.
I think what would be helpful is just to kind of talk a little bit about my journey and how I discovered that all the feelings we feel are felt by the feeling mind of the heart, and how I arrived at the heartfulness. I was unwell around 1992. I had postnatal depression, which had triggered multiple traumas that I suffered in my childhood and also in my teens. And when I went to see my GP and I expressed that I was not feeling very well, that I wasn't able to manage and cope at home, and I had a baby and I can't sleep anymore, and I'm struggling with eating and everything else. So I was advised to see a psychotherapist who was based at the clinic, who was from a psychoanalytical approach. And I started seeing her for the first few weeks. And I realized that I wasn't really making any progress. Each time I go, I'm lying down and I'm just talking and talking and talking. And the feedback that I am getting wasn't really kind of really meeting my needs. I felt like I had to explain myself. I felt like I had to explain my culture. I had to explain how I was feeling. And then it got to the point where I have had a spiritual experience when I was a child, and I was very frightened because I had burglars who had come and taken some stuff from my neighbor and from my home, and I wasn't aware of. And then obviously it must have triggered the time when I was frightened, when I was on my own at the age of 6, just with my siblings, my adopted sister and my brother, who was older than I am, and everyone had gone to a wedding and we were left behind. And then suddenly I just felt so overwhelmed with fear that we were by ourselves. And I felt it more because my siblings were sleeping, but I was awake. I was lying down, but suddenly I was awake. And then I just remembered an aunt who had mothered me. She one day was accused of something that she didn't do, and she was very angry, the woman who accused her. And I remember her praying and asking Allah, to give her justice for the pain that she has suffered. And her prayers were answered, and the woman was actually murdered in a very horrible way. And to me, as a child, I was only 6. I was really, it was like my first lesson that Allah is all hearing and all seeing of what's going on, with people. So at that moment, I kind of remembered my aunt praying. So I just prayed and asking Allah to kind of look after me and my siblings. And then suddenly I just felt this warm light that just entered me. It was so powerful. And the pillow that I was laying on felt so hard, suddenly it felt like I was lying in wings of angels. It just felt like that. And it was just really very warming light and healing light. And I just felt really, really, high. That fear just completely went away. And then I just fell asleep, and without any worry until the morning. And I felt different after that. There was something that had happened that was very special. So that was my first connection with Allah, being aware of Allah at the age of 6. And because also my parents had left and came to England, and I didn't see them for another 2 years. So I was just looked after with my siblings by, our family, aunties and uncles. So then what happened after that, 5 years when we were separated from, our parents, those 5 years were difficult. They were not easy. And traumas have happened during that time. And when I came to England with my brother, I was at the age of 11. It was very difficult because I didn't want to come to England. All I wanted was our parents to be with us back home. And I remember saying to my father, I don't want to come to England. I don't want to be here when I arrived here. Because it meant I was taken away from my adopted sister. I missed my aunt, who I have learned a lot wisdom from her, the community, everything that my whole environment was completely, it's like a plant, you take it from its roots. And I felt like that, and I was not happy about that. And then after 4 years later, my father died in a car crash. And then my brother became unwell after that. And so many things had happened as a result during that time. So when I got married, I had lots of baggage of traumas that I have not worked with, that I have suffered. And after the honeymoon, I started to have dreams about the past. And they would come like once every 6 months. And then they became suddenly very intrusive. But then after my second child, after giving birth, a year later, I was still suffering from depression, which was not really dealt with earlier on or treated. And as a result, I developed post-traumatic stress disorder. So when I went to see the therapist, it was kind of a very minded, kind of cognitive way of talking and not really understanding or meeting my needs. And I was told by a lady in the community that why don't I go to an organization called Nafsiyat, which I went to, and the clinician there was a Muslim, And the organization had the name Nafsiyat, which means psychodynamics, but that was the only thing that was Islamic about it. I wasn't specifically looking for an Islamic treatment, let's say, but I was looking for a treatment that would work for me. But there wasn't, unfortunately, any treatment. The clinician that I had seen in Nafsiyat had said to me, after telling him everything that I had gone through with my traumas, he said to me, when you come next time, I need you to tell me the truth. And I was very confused when I left, thinking, what does he mean by that? And I obviously later on, very much later, I understood that he must have thought, if I had gone through what I have gone through, I should have been in a mental home. And I realized later that was really unprofessional of him to say, when you come back next time, tell me the truth. But unfortunately, he died very soon after that. So I never had the opportunity to go back and see him again. And I often wonder whether I was his last patient. But I never find out. So as time went on, I couldn't really continue seeing him. Not that I found that he was going to be any helpful. So then I was going through the turmoil with my feelings of and the chaos that I was going through and the torture that I was going through of not sleeping, not eating properly, and the pain that I was going through was so overwhelming. And yet the treatment was not really fitting for me, and so I was wondering at that time, what do people do? What's going to happen to other people if they're feeling like me and the treatment is not really suitable for them, it's not really meeting their needs. So when I met with Humaira and she said to me, how is the therapy going? Humaira is from our Nisa Society organization, and I said to her, well, actually it's not going anywhere. I'm not going to be going for therapy for long because it's not working. So she said, well, there is someone that we know, and his name is Hakim Salim, who's been talking about Islamic counseling and psychotherapy. So the talks have started during that time about organizing a course that people would study, because Humaira was saying that I was not the only one who was suffering. There are other people, just in the same way that I was thinking, what do people do, if they were feeling like me. So the discussions have started, and Khalida and Humaira working together and got all the clinicians who were Muslims who they knew to kind of put something together for people to train in, so that there is alternative therapy for Muslims that would be fitting for their needs. So
I do want to interject. So when you say that you went to these people and they were not meeting your need, how would it have looked differently? What could have happened that your need would have been met?
Well, first of all, I expected someone to understand how I was feeling. For example, when I said to the therapist, when I explained about the light that I felt, when I was a child, and I connected with Allah and at that moment, and it made me feel good. So she said to me, oh, you've created God to make yourself feel better. So all she had to do with me was actually to stay with the process of my relationship with Allah and to see how I can access that relationship to help me in my life. This is the angle that a Muslim therapist would go for, because at the time I was suffering to the point that I was feeling suicidal. And in fact, after I stopped seeing her in that transitional time, I started to feel not just suicidal. I started to think about making a plan And one of my plans was that, well, if I throw myself out of the window and I die, my children are going to be left behind. So maybe I should throw my children first and then throw myself. So I had to do my own assessment at the time, thinking this is not balanced thinking. And I was horrified by thinking like that. So what I've done, I went and done wudu, and I did 2 rakats late at night. And then I had a a wonderful insight. Allah had showed me Jannah, and I have seen the Shajarat Zarqum, and was shown things, and people have maqams in Jannah, and I was shown those maqams. And then when I smelt the sandalwood, that was something that was kind of healing for me. And when I came back, I felt really, again, that feeling of that warmth and that light that I had felt when I was a child. I felt the same, and I felt really high. I felt like I've been given something very special. There was a gift that at the time I didn't understand. But later on, things unfolded. So at that moment, in coming back and feeling so good, and then after a few days later, I would be feeling so bad, and I would be feeling psychotic, just for like episodes of it. And then when I felt kind of the psychosis was happening, I would smell the sandalwood, and then it will bring me back into my senses.
So you would conjure up the smell yourself? Like, would you focus on it, or would it just come by itself?
No, it just comes by itself from nowhere. And sometimes even if I'm outside and I'm walking and I feel like I'm losing it because the pain is so intense, and then I will just smell it, and then I'll come back into my senses.
What do you think that is? Is it just like ilham, like some divine aid, grace?
My spiritual teacher said that when Allah wants to heal someone, he finds a way of how to bring them back into their sense. And that was what was happening with me, that I wasn't meant to lose it. And also Allah says, I'm at the expectation of my servant. And I've always felt in my heart that one day I'm going to find out what's been happening with me, and I'm going to understand what's been happening. And it's not the Western training or therapists that are going to tell me what's happening with me. And the journey was long, and I did find that out. So then after that, I felt sometimes I was feeling better, sometimes I was feeling a little bit worse than I had been. It's like they're kind of patterns, because I wasn't getting therapy consistently, but I was, what I found that was very helpful was actually being part of a community, because in An-Nisa we had the Islamic circles. There were talks about the prophets, and I kind of got energy from that whenever we had the gatherings. That kind of kept me surviving, if you like, until I started having counseling. Again, it wasn't a Muslim counselor, but it was someone from the community, again arranged by the GP. But it was mostly kind of me just talking about my feelings, that the therapist was from an African background, but she was just very open to listening, and I think she had also some understanding of the Muslim culture because of being in the area where she was. So she wasn't really following, I think she was following Carl Rogers more than psychoanalytical approach. So it's just kind of, you know, the acceptance of whatever you bring into the space. And for me, that at the time, it was something that I kind of needed just to keep me going. But there was always something inside of me that it was never enough, that one day I will find out exactly what's going on. So then time passed on. My kind of suicidal thoughts had gone away. I traveled, and I was kind of more open about my traumas and spoke about them, and life went on. And unfortunately, I did ask for a divorce, which on hindsight, years later, I did regret. And because at the time I felt like I was not going to get better, and the issues that I had are always going to be there. And then I was on my own, and that was very difficult, being on my own as well. So that had its own issues. And one of the reasons that I'm doing this videos is because I want women who are suffering from depression or post-traumatic stress disorder not to make themselves suffer for a long time. You know, once you start to feel that you're not yourself anymore, something has changed, that you can't sleep, you can't eat, there's something not right, to seek help. And I know that it's difficult, particularly in England, because the way the NHS is set up at the moment, and there's only 6 weeks of therapy and you have to wait for a long time. People are accessing therapy privately. And it would be important to seek help, because the longer you leave it, the more you'll suffer, and especially when you have children, because they suffer the neglect of mothers who are not present, because even if you're with your children, you're not completely present with them. And as a result, their life also becomes traumatized afterwards with neglect. And the suffering for everyone is not necessarily because there is help out there. It's not like the 90s or the 70s. You know, things can be, treatment can be accessed. And so just going back into my journey, I started training as a counselor and a psychotherapist, and thought maybe this is my way of finding out what's happening with me, because what I was experiencing was at times when my soul would leave my body, and I witnessed my body leaving my soul and traveling and then coming back into my body. And the flashbacks and the nightmares and all of that, I always felt the Western methods are not, prognosis are not going to tell me about what's going on with me. So I did do the Islamic counseling and psychotherapy diploma. And after that, I felt there's more that I needed to learn. And it was during that time when I met with my sheikh. It was something that we just met in the airport with his family and my family, and then I started to talk about the training that I'm getting, and also I had lots of questions, and I was explaining about witnessing my ruh leaving my body and coming back. and I was put into what we call the khalwa, the retreat of doing meditation with La ilaha illallah and kind of witnessing. And that was an experiential kind of treatment that I was receiving, which was very much in connection with what I had experienced at the age of 6, feeling the light enter you and kind of cleansing and washing and purifying and just feeling, in a state of bliss. That kind of light kind of continued. And that was part of my healing, because although part of my training and having therapy with an integrative psychotherapist, which was part of my training, by itself it was not enough. And I'm afraid to say that my integrative psychotherapist was a good therapist, but again, she didn't understand my background. She didn't understand my faith. And I often tell my supervisors that when I have therapy, there is a split, because I can't bring the whole of myself into the therapy. Because once I mentioned something that I had prayed for, and it happened, and then she came out with a negative thing saying, oh, good, that's good that God heard you, but he didn't hear the people in Syria who've been killed. Those kind of remarks kind of make it feel like it's not safe for me to bring the whole of myself. So I just spoke about my clients' work that I was doing in my training, and because that was part and parcel of the of having therapy, is to talk about the work as well as to talk about myself in my journey of working and what's going on for me. And as a result, that split actually continued, of not bringing my whole self into the therapy. So I was dealing with the spiritual aspect with my sheikh, who was also my spiritual trainer, and then having my therapist as well as my supervisors supervising the work that I was doing.
Do you feel that those two worked in tandem, like having that spiritual support and working with the whole esoteric aspect in conjunction with your therapist? Your therapist was just like a traditional, normal Western therapist?
Yeah, she was an integrative. She wasn't a psychoanalytical, but again, she was very ignorant of, she had a very negative understanding of Islam and Muslims. And she would come up with very negative remarks about how some Asian women would be treated badly. She couldn't obviously understand their cultures, which are very which are against Islam. It's something that we don't actually agree with. The abuse of daughter-in-laws, for example. That kind of behavior of how they are treated in the home. We know that in Islam, a husband is responsible for his wife, and he should not subject her to stay with her in-laws. But for her, she is seeing that as this is Islam.
Right. But did you find anything beneficial from her at all? I mean, if you were continuing with her, did you?
Yeah. Yes, on the humanistic approach, yes, it was useful and supportive. But when it came to my faith and my culture, I felt like I couldn't really talk about that, because she will come up with something very negative. So it didn't feel safe. So I had to assess what I was bringing into the therapy. And that's why I've been saying I can't bring the whole of myself. I have to always assess what I'm saying and what I'm processing with her. So in a way, it wasn't complete. So the other aspects that I could not take with her, I have to discuss them with my sheikh and go through them. So the healing process was spiritually, it was done by my spiritual teacher, and with my therapist, it was just the normal emotional and the psychological to do with what was going on for me at the time, and kind of not bringing the spiritual part of it. And to be honest, even if I had seen a Muslim therapist, she would not been able to contain that spiritual part, because there are things that only someone who has the sacred knowledge will understand and can interpret them for me. So I was very lucky that I actually had someone who had that science, and not every sheikh has that science. You know, the sacred knowledge of the nafs is given to very, very, very few.
And then what follows in your story, how you ended up? I'm very curious, like, what were those main things that you found were most beneficial to you to get you from that point of being steeped in all this trauma to feeling, wow, I am well, I'm healed, and I can become a healer myself?
Yes, yeah. It kind of came together because in my work, and I noticed that my supervisor would, when I kind of talk about the clients that I was working with at the time, which were both adults and children, and she would say, wow, this is a huge shift, Amina. And she will say to me, it sounds like you have shifted as well. You know, because we also impact the client group, that when we're working with them, we are in the same space. And yeah, and that transformation happened in me kind of completing the 7 levels of the self, which is an experiential aspect that one has to go through that journey in order to arrive. So it was a healing process, as well as developing, you know, those states or maqams, and with those maqams come the knowledge of understanding the human psyche in a much more deeper way. And sheikhs normally don't explain, they don't tell you what's going to happen, they just give you what you're supposed to read, and then when you read them, they'll tell you whether you've completed or whether you don't need to do anymore, you already arrived where you needed to arrive, and then they move you on to the next level. And that way, it's also at the same time, it's a healing process. So after completing the 7 levels of the self, you know, and understanding the lata'if, which you probably saw in my article, those points that are there on the next level to that, one becomes activated. And whenever you are feeling low, those points kind of connect, and you start to feel the healing within yourself, healing yourself.
Wow, so it's deep spiritual work.
Yeah, it is. It is hard work, but if you're you know, you will arrive on the journey if you want that journey, but it's something not everybody wants. But for me, it wasn't something that I kind of was looking for, but it was Allah who kind of set it up for me from the age of 6. That was my kind of feeling that there is something here that I have felt. And also I remember when I was at the age of 6, there were some members of my family, elder men, who were talking about sacred knowledge. And they said something at the time, I can't remember what it was, but it kind of got me really intrigued. And I remember saying to myself at the time, I want this knowledge. And I remember that kind of time that I learned about 3 things, which was about the light, hearing about the sacred knowledge. And then I remember once it was Maghrib time, and in the seasons in Morocco, we have like the olives season, and the olives are normally kind of picked and stored, and the way they're stored or made into the oils, and then we have the seasons where the women dye the wool and they make the rugs with it. And I kind of witnessed all of that, the harvest. And I was brought up in this rich culture, and I kind of absorbed it all. And then one day, and it was Maghrib time, I was thinking to myself, okay, so this is what happens. And then after Ramadan, you see lots of weddings, circumcision, aqiqas, and all that happens. And I thought to myself, there must be more to this than just what's happening here, about the seasons. There's something that I need to find out. What is my purpose? Why am I here? And I think that was something also that Allah had answered for me when I was at the age of 18. I had my third trauma, and I remember I was feeling very sad and very upset. And again, I've done 2 rakats, and I said, Allah, I just want you to take me away from where I am now, the town I was living and the people that were around me, and I just wanted to leave that town completely. And I remember I had a vivid dream that was so vivid that it kind of answered the question that I had when I was at the age of 6, when I wanted to understand what was my purpose in life. And what I discovered in that dream was that people were in ranks according to their maqams, and the safest group that was very safe were those who are sincere and doing khidmah for people. And that kind of really, really stayed with me. And then I was shown a note in my hand, and it says London on it. And so when I came to London, I came to the mosque for a different reason. I never really kind of linked my dreams with coming to London. But Allah again made a way for me, and I came to London. And then after that, I have met with the Anisa ladies, and I think that Allah kind of put our hearts together because they're people of khidmah. We have this love and compassion for the community and the importance of the community. And I was saved by that.
It's absolutely fascinating. MashaAllah, you have such a rich dream life. It's astounding, truly. Would you like to add anything about your own healing journey, or would you like to head towards the advice you would give to women out there who are suffering?
I think whatever people are compassionate with and whatever they love, Allah will give them a way and they will arrive at it. And my advice is to never give up on your journey, because whatever, we Arabs, we say that whenever there's a caravan, dogs will bark, and there will always be people who will stop you. There will always be enemies who will put you down, but you just carry on and you will arrive where you want to be. And as for my advice for people who are suffering out there, please don't suffer. Do seek help and find out in your community where you can get help from, because the longer you suffer, the more, if you have children particularly, the more your children will suffer.
I do want to ask you on that point, though, that given your own experience with certain therapists who were quite inadequate in certain ways, how does one find the right person? And then secondly, even when you were mentioning about your spiritual openings that you had with your spiritual guide, You were very lucky, but my critical voice was also saying that, well, you hear of many people, many women who, when they are going through this pain, they're very vulnerable. And they come to this religious person, and sometimes there's abuse there. The person might not be authentic or have good intentions. So you had a real ni'mah, blessing, that you had exactly what you needed. But what advice would you give to women out there who are in the depths of trauma and they don't really know how to navigate a way forward?
Yeah. To follow the Islamic safeguarding notes is never to be alone with a man. You know, my spiritual teacher had a wife, and he would always take his wife wherever he goes. So both of them were helping me, and my spiritual teacher, in fact, used to always, when he's talking to women, he will have his eyes closed. And at the time, my youngest child, she would say to me, is the sheikh blind? Because he had a proper adab of lowering his gaze. And, you know, and he would teach like women, you know, he would never put himself in a situation where he's alone with a woman. And if sometimes I needed to see him, it would be, and if his wife is not there, it would be in the public area, and I would take a friend with me. So the advice is never, and I'm aware myself, there's a lot of exploitation by just people who are doing ruqya, not people who have sacred knowledge, just ordinary raqis. And it's you know, it's abuse beyond reason. And sometimes it's not enough to have one person. You need to have two people. So if one person needs to leave the room to get something, someone else needs to be there. You know, if those boundaries are followed, then obviously there'll be safety.
Amina, if you could share with us, what was it that then ended up leading you to finally becoming a counselor, therapist yourself? And then also what it is that inspires you about your work?
Yeah, one of the things that all the things that I was lacking in my therapy journey, which I've experienced, I've kind of trained in, and I've become the therapist that I would have liked to have seen when I was going through my traumas. And my clients can bring the whole of themselves into my space. There is no split, because when clients are too spiritual, I can contain their spirituality, and I can give them explanation about what they're experiencing. And if they're not, like, you know, obviously I work with Muslims and I work with non-Muslims, I work with people who are practicing and I work with people who are not practicing. I also work with children, and my traumas have become my wisdom, because as a child I have experienced traumas, so I can relate to the children when they are talking about their traumas, and whatever family lifestyles that they belong to, I have an insight of their environment. And also with adults, they can obviously bring the whole of themselves and talk about their experiences. And because there's a lot of you know, the blind spots within the journey of going through the process of healing. And because I've been through that journey, I know what the dangers are, and I know what the blind spots are. So that because I've gone through that journey, it makes it easier for me to meet their needs, because I have two insights. And my spiritual teacher used to say that the best clinicians are those who've been through the same similar experiences. because you have a personal experience, and also you have the clinical training, and they go together hand in hand. So when people start to talk about their feelings, I can tell which stage they're at in their trauma, whether it's initially the first stages or whether they are in the middle of what they're going through. And so that makes it easier for me when I'm doing the assessment where they're at. And I know how to get them to, to shift in the right direction. And especially when I explain to them, what's going on, they seem to always say, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going through. And for me, that's what, makes that transformation makes a whole difference to my life, that I'm able to help people. And the traumas that I've experienced have become my wisdom in having that experience.
That's what I find so compelling and inspiring about your story, is that a person can be in the depths of despair and hardship, but how that can be taken and really converted, like this energy gets converted into something so powerful that can benefit so many people and benefit oneself. So that's really, that's hopeful. That's very hopeful. So Jazakallah khair for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Hope to have you again, inshallah, soon.
Inshallah, thank you.
Kula tawfiq in your endeavors, in your practice, and that your community can attain maximum benefit from the work that you and your colleagues are doing, and for your family as well. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Barakallahu fiki.